Hey, here I am. Boy, I overslept. I'm behind the eight ball. I'm just trying to get my head together, get in the game, and ready to roll. And my brain is just not cooperating with me yet. But here we go. And so, yeah, it's Wednesday, July 24th. My name is Rob. I'm that developer dad. And yesterday we spent a good bit of time talking about what comes next. We've got a decent set of, excuse me, a decent set of features in the application right now. It can do some pretty cool things. It randomly generates a bunch of appearance attributes for our non-player characters, and then optionally feeds those off to the LLM for a richer text-based description. And I realized that other people might find this useful. So yesterday, I went through an exercise where I listed out all the things, or as many things as I could come up with, that we haven't done yet, that are required to take this from a nifty console app toy to a published web application that we could make available to other people to use. And I kind of color coded things over here so that I could see which ones were the most important. The black background things with the white text, those denote concepts that we need to start focusing on as we go. And I'm going to change monitoring to match that. Where's my background on this shape? Here we go. Shape fill. Monitoring is something we really need to start paying attention to as we work. And so we pulled all of the sort of angry, ripe tomato methods or points over to another slide. And I grouped them into automated testing, user interface, storage resource, monitoring we're going to start paying attention to as we go. And then in the afternoon, I ranked those high priority items about, what's missing, what's blocking other things, what can and or should wait. And I've got some missing unit tests, and I'll add those offline at some point soon, because there's no sense in sitting here writing reams and reams of implementation tests. I already did that during, I think, the first week of development on this for the DICE engine, and there's a few new methods on those DICE engine classes that I really ought to wrap some tests around, just so that I can have absolute trust that they're behaving themselves. Now, our contract tests, I talked about that a little bit yesterday afternoon and tried to set up some behavior-driven design, some Gherkin some automated tests in Gherkin language. And I discovered that the tooling that I used to use for that when I would do it, SpecFlow, doesn't support newer versions of the dotNet framework. So I had to do some research, and I found an actual fork of the SpecFlow project that is going to be carried forward to new versions of the framework as they're released. So that's what I want to get into today, is actually writing those tests. So I'm going to shrink PowerPoint down, and I'm so far behind the eight ball I haven't even connected to my development environment yet. You'd almost think it was Monday. Come on. There we go. Continue. Pull this over here. Nope. Come here. All right. So for when you're using BDD, there's a different extension from SpecFlow for Visual Studio that we use excuse me, or that we need to use now, especially if we're targeting versions of dotNet that are greater than 6. And we're up to 8, and 9's coming in a few months. But I disabled SpecFlow, and I'll remove it completely after this morning's session. But I added something called Reqnroll, which, as I said, the folks that make Reqnroll, they created a fork of the SpecFlow code base and updated it for .NET 7, .NET 8, and they're actively maintaining it. So what did I do? Well, I went out to Copilot and I asked it to generate a few scenarios against the getNPCOptions method on the townsfolk manager component. And it said, okay, well, let's simulate what happens when it retrieves them successfully. And it uses Gherkin language. And a lot of people don't like BDD. I like using BDD, especially Gherkin, because it can really help keep me out of a pickle. And so the whole idea with this is that we're describing different scenarios under which a feature is used and different scenarios that can happen when we use that feature. And I like to break things down so that a feature corresponds to a method on an API or a component or whatever. And I tend to get pretty in deep on the code. So Gherkin language has 3 primary keywords: given, when, and then. So given aligns to arrange from more classic unit tests. When is act. And then is the result of the action and the assertion that we can make. And then you can get a whole lot richer. You can add given this and this condition when I call NPC options and but some other negating condition. You can do all kinds of complex stuff. I want to keep it simple for the purposes of this demonstration. So I've got a happy path, and these are tags that you can use to create your to help document your tests. And those go into the test report that can be generated later. I haven't done a generated test report with Reqnroll yet, so it'll be an adventure to figure out how to get that built for us. And then unhappy path are, what are the ways this could go wrong? What conditions for this particular feature or API method or whatever could cause a fail mode? And as I've noted here in the comments, like, we should receive an empty dictionary if the rule set access isn't properly configured, or there's nothing in the rule set for character options or what have you. And yeah, it should, from a conceptual level, return an empty dictionary. But my opinion as the developer and the designer of the application, if the rule set access component isn't configured properly, then I don't want the app to start, because that's absolutely a failure mode. Like, that's a definite hard dependency. So we may change that as we go, or as we implement these things, to actually throw an exception, because an exception at startup is okay. You don't necessarily want an exception when you're running through your workloads and while the app is running and being hosted and all of that stuff. It's exceptions and handling and when we should use them and when we should wrap them in some other thing is a very long conversation. It's longer than the time I want to take right now. But there's a ton of different techniques you can use to properly handle exceptions. And I need to qualify the word properly handle by saying sometimes you want the exception to actually make it out to your root level process host. Other times you do want to wrap it up so that the process host can still be informed, but do something other than just freak out and crash or throw an error message or whatever. It's kind of an art. And then finally, we have another unhappy path. Let's say for our particular rule set, it's missing some required template collections. When we call NPC options, then yeah, we should receive a dictionary with the empty arrays for the missing option sets. But we should probably, this also feels like a failure mode, but maybe we should warn when it happens. I'm not sure. I think when the rule set is not configured, we absolutely want to crash. We should have a fatal failure mode. And as I think through this one, I might be able to reuse this template and the rule set concept when I get into, say, more monstrous enemies. Like, I can't think of a gelatinous cube having a background or a current vocation or even much of a description. But I don't necessarily want to break the pattern of trying to apply those. So we might need to do a little bit more thinking around this scenario in particular. Now, last night when I was getting Reqnroll configured, I'm going to go ahead and delete. I want to make sure I clicked on the right thing here, because I don't want to delete something I don't want to. So let's get rid of that class file right now. Goodbye. And I'm going to rebuild real quick, but just this test project. And all of these guys should turn purple, maybe. Now, let's get rid of the feature.cs file as well. And where are you? I don't want to do that. What even are you? Let's delete the, yes, just the CS file. Okay, so that reverts our feature file to its original state. Excuse me. And that feature.cs file actually gets generated by the Reqnroll project when we build. So that actually raises another point, and I need to come out to excuse me. Pardon me. Goodness. I need to come out here and I got to edit my git ignore. And let's open with, let's just open it with Notepad. Okay. And I'm going to add a comment here. Reqnroll generated files star dot feature dot cs. I'm going to save that. I'm actually going to shrink that down here because we're going to need to add it again when I add the step definitions. So I've got my feature here as if I had just imported it or just typed it in or just copied and pasted it in from whatever AI I used to generate these. And I need to generate the code for it. So we're going to go to define steps. And it actually takes a stab at creating the method stubs for all the different methods that need to be called when we run these tests. And it creates a class, get NPC options, step definitions. Okay, let's create it. And it generates a C# file for us. So yeah, it is just the .feature.cs that we want to ignore when we push to Git. Because if we ignore these step definitions and we commit, that means whoever brings it down is going to have to write all of these methods or implement all of these methods manually before they can run the tests, and that's not something we want to do to ourselves or other people on the team. So, given rule set access is properly configured, well, when we get here, we're back to just classic unit test writing. So we want to do arrange, act, and actually this is just arrange. And this is all within the context of the NPC options step definition. So private I townsfolk manager test class and we're going to need to reference that. Add reference to game tools.townsfolk manager. Yep. That's what I want to do. Good. And I believe there is some way public void initialize for tests. And I want to make this nullable. Maybe. Yeah, I do. No, I don't. Probably even get rid of this. Because we're going to have to instantiate our test class inside these given blocks. So what do we need to do for this? When the manager has a correct reference to the resource access and it's been configured with, for these purposes, the 5e rule set. Well, no, because we don't want to necessarily connect to the exactly correct with a valid rule set. Our test class is properly configured. And I need to rename this to one of these days I'll figure out the right keybinds and get those stuffed into my muscle memory. There we go. So test class. Now we don't want to actually have a reference to the, pardon me, the concrete rule set access. So let's check our project references here. We definitely need a reference to the definitions. And we probably need a reference to rule set access. But just to get our mitts on the interfaces. Let's come in here and take a look at definitions, iGame option set, blah, blah, blah. Characters, iCharacter creation rules. All right. And then out here in rule set access, rule set access, we'll need to mock out load character creation rules. Okay. So we don't want to actually have rule set access. We should probably build too. So let's build again. And it's doing its thing. And it's crunching and crunching. Okay, it's done. And just to show what happens when we run, I want to run this whole block of tests. They all fail right now. It's not that the code's bad, it's that the tests aren't implemented. So happy path, and we run into XUnit pending step exception. Great. But our tests run. So rule set access is not properly configured. Can I go to the definition? Yes, we can. All right. Next thing we got to talk about is these dependencies. So test class equals new townsfolk manager. And it's going to grouch at us because it needs rule set access, it needs a shuffler, and it needs a dice bag. I don't want to actually reference the definite, concrete implementations of those dependencies and provide them to our test suite. So what we're going to do is we're going to mock them. And I don't remember if I added the mock package to this yesterday. I did. Great. Now, it's been quite some time since I've written code like this, like more than a year. Actually, no, about a year. And have I brought in mock? Nope, I have not. Resource access. Did I reference the proper thing? Let's look at our dependencies and our projects. Rule set access. Gosh. Rule set access. I'm going to use game tools rule set access. Mock rule set equals new mock of rule set access. And that's complaining. I'm going to turn this into a var. Mock rule set dot setup, and then x dot load character creation rules. Dot returns var. We're going to need to mock that valid rule set. So let's rename this variable to mock rule set access. Great. I'm going to change valid rule set to rule set var mock rule set equals new mock of character creation rules. Oh boy. Excuse me. These need to, this is going to get quickly out of hand, but let's do them in method right now. Mock rule set dot setup x dot species rules dot returns get away from me, IntelliSense. Returns mock species rules. You're going to need to set those up too. Mock rule set dot setup x dot background rules dot returns. Now, why am I doing all of this stuff? Well, because our existing rule set is just a hard-coded, is just a project of hard-coded stuff, I could just use it, but I want to test the semantics and all of that stuff. Mock rule set dot setup x dot vocation rules, not vacation rules, but vocation rules. Oh, what do you, there we go. Dot returns mock vocation rules. Var mock species rules equals new mock of, and what's species rules? It's species data. Species data. And that's in our definitions. We could actually use the concrete types here. We absolutely could. New species data. Species. That's an abstract class, isn't it? Yep. All right, so it's got to be a mock. Species data. What are you doing, Rob? Come on, wakey wakey. Looks like, yep, I lost my remote connection. Just a second. Sometimes Wi-Fi lets us down. I think I have a switch around here that I can plug in and use for that. So I need a mock of species data. Man, my head is not with me right now. New mock of species data. Dot setup. Oh yeah. X dot name. Load list, get type. Okay, I guess it hasn't got a name. Oh, right, because it's species data. Duh. Dot list. Doesn't it like there? Dot returns. It really, really, really doesn't like me trying to do this fluently. So we'll just pop down here. Mock species setup. Rules. Dot setup. Setup list, returns. Let's align this. New string array. Whoops. Elf. Dwarf. Human. Halfling. There. Okay. mock species rules dot object. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Okay, so when we define these variables, we're not actually creating an object of the type species data. We're creating a mock of these concrete types, or of these interfaces or abstract types or whatever. And what that does, the mock allows us to say, you are an object that is pretending to be one of these. And when somebody asks you for your list, you'll return this. Mock, var, mock background rules equals new mock of background data. Mock background data. How about mock background rules, Rob? My goodness, I am not well caffeinated. Dot setup x dot list all right, no dot returns, and my gut's telling me I'm forgetting something here. String array. I'm just going to add a couple to this. Just stuff from memory. Acolyte, soldier, urchin, there. And then down here, when we want to return the pretend object from a mock, we just say that. Okay. And then finally, var mock location equals new mock of vocation data, mock vocation rules dot setup. When somebody gets the list of vocation rules, we're going to return a new string array with butcher, baker, candlestick maker. Save and tell it to return the object. And I got to call it the right thing. There we go. And then mock rule set irk. We need to provide the object. Now, our mock rule set access, set upload character creation rules, mock rule set dot object. Good. And we can do mock rule set access Let me load character creation rules. Okay. Dot object. Okay, it still wants a dice bag and a card deck, but I'm just going to set these up to do nothing because we don't actually need those for this particular thing. So mock var mock shuffler equals new mock of card deck. We're not going to bother doing any setup here. Var mock dice bag equals new mock of a dice bag, and let's pass these in. Mock, what's it looking for? Card deck. Mock shuffler dot object. Finally, mock dice bag dot object. And there we go. So what we've done is we've just created let's pretend versions of all of these dependencies. And we've injected those let's depend pretendencies into an instance of our townsfolk manager. So let's go back to our feature and go to the next. Let's go to the definition for the next step. And test class dot get NPC options. So that's just going to execute the function. We need to read that into a variable so that we can check stuff inside the result. Private. And the result of get NPC options, if I remember right, come here. What do you give me? A dictionary of string and string array. Dictionary of string and string array. NPC options. I'm going to make this whole thing nullable. Now I'm going to say public test setup, and it needs to be a void. And I want NPC options equals null. I want to reset that in between every feature. And I believe, or in between every scenario. So we're going to reset NPC options to null in between every scenario. Every time our test runner moves from this to this to this, we're going to make it like NPC options hasn't been called. That's going to be important. And we can throw this away. And we can throw that away. And we don't need to return anything. Get NPC options. We need to NPC options equals test class.get NPC options. And then I should receive a containing valid options for species, background, and vocation. All right, this is where we do some assertions. So I'm going to do this. Nullable int species count equals NPC options dot nope species dot length I think I'm even going to go so far as to make the value part of that dictionary nullable. So the whole dictionary is nullable, and these values are nullable as well. And there's a better way of accessing these things. Var species list equals NPC options dot try get value species out string array species list. This won't crash if there's no key for species. It'll just return either a null string array or the actual value. And that will cut down on species list might be null dot length. Now, what are you complaining about? It says unassigned use of local variable. You're insane. Did I type it wrong? Nope. Use of unassigned local variable species list. It's right here, man. And it returns so this is a Boolean method. Why isn't it letting me use this? That's weird. I've done this many, many times before. Fine. Species list equals null, then null, else, species list.length, and is still complaining. I think it's probably crazy. Let's go ahead and let's do the null propagation. That's fine. That's what I want. Now let's save. I'm going to build this project just for laughs to see if it actually throws up on me or not. Because it shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, use with unassigned local variable species list. What happens if I declare it first? List equals null. Now it's going to complain about that, but can I use out parameters like this? Yes, I can. Okay, good. What that does is we're declaring a nullable string array as null. We're setting it to be an output parameter on our try_get_value method on our dictionary. If it can't get a value if there's no value assigned to the key species, or even if there's no entry with species as the key, it's just going to set that to null and it'll silently return false. We don't care about the result of that in this case. And then we just measure the length of the list or the array. And if the array is null, we say null. So we can do this with the other three things. String, array, location list equals null, NPC options dot try get value locations out location list int come on count. Do the same thing. String array nullable background list is null. NPC options dot try get value backgrounds out background list int background count. Let it finish that. And how do we test for validity here? We are going to assert dot do we have greater than? Nope. Assert dot not null species count assert, and again this is flying in the face of classic unit test rules. Because you're only supposed to have one assert per test, and yeah, that doesn't always work out well. It's not always practical. Assert dot not null background count we have more than 0, and then assert dot not null is location count. And assert true, vocation count is greater than 0. So all 3 of our rule lists are populated or exist and are populated if everything worked well. So let's save this and let's see if it'll let us run just this scenario. Not here, but we can come down to our test explorer. This one we can run. And let's see what happens. It failed again. Non-overridable members species data.list may not be used in setup verification. So I goofed something up with when mocking. May not be used in setup verification expressions. Okay. Ew. Gross. I don't want to have to mock the entire behavior of this thing. I really, really don't. And that suggests something I forgot about using mock frameworks and stuff like that. Like mocking abstract classes is significantly different from mocking interfaces, and it may not be a good choice. Now, I don't want to change my code design or my architecture just to be able to mock it. That's dumb. Because I've got it set as an abstract class for a reason. But I do need to be able to test this thing. So I think for those, we're going to have to use fakes. And we're going to cover that later this afternoon, because we are at the end of our hour. So what I'm going to do is come in here to where we're properly configuring. We're going to go to that definition, hide this stuff. Can't mock abstract classes. Gonna have to use fakes instead for these. And that's okay. We'll cover it. Fakes are pretty easy to do. This afternoon, we're going to set these up so that they're not mocks, but fakes. And really all a fake is we're going to do something other than this, and we're just going to hard code some crap into it, and it'll be fine. This ought to work fine, but I do want to do some cleanup here because we're going to want to reuse some of this mock setup here and there throughout our throughout this set of feature steps. So this afternoon, we're going to set these up as fakes, get this properly configured. We're going to get this first happy path feature test working. That should set us up for success on our unhappy paths and act as enough of a memory refresher for me to be able to do this stuff efficiently without too much stumbling around. And then once we've got these 3 defined and set up and running and passing, I want to try automating the run of all of our defined tests before I'm able to push a set of commits up to the server, up to GitHub. So if we can get all this stuff working in time to dig into test automation within the local development environment, I definitely want to get there today. If we don't get there today, we'll do local test automation tomorrow morning. This afternoon, we're going to get this set of tests set up and running. All right, folks, it's time to break for lunch and do some real life stuff and all of those things. Drink water, eat food. I'm going to drink more coffee because my head is not installed where it should be right now. And I will see you all at 1. Take care, folks.